Let's talk about God. Let's talk about Jesus Christ, his risen and living Son. Let's talk about love. Let's talk about freedom and newfound strength. Let's talk about pain, sadness, anger, and fear, but also spiritual growth as a result of surrender and trust in the Lord. Let's also talk about recovery, forgiveness, and healing, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Let's talk about peace, happiness, and overwhelming joy. Let's talk about all these things and more every Sunday night on Conscious Conversations, hosted by me, Stephen Ray Watts, 10 to midnight Mountain Standard Time, right here on KUHSdenver.com.
Good afternoon and welcome to the KUHSdenver.com Artist Nook. My name is Laura Paget and I will be with you with my very special guest I'm going to introduce you to in just a moment. For the next half hour. It's a very cold day here in Denver, Colorado, but we want you to warm up with us and KUHS, and the stories that we're about to help you understand here in a few moments are going to definitely warm your heart. But that ad that I started my show with is my good friend Stephen Ray Watts from the band Dot Zero, and he has a program also on KUHS every Sunday night from 10 to midnight called Conscious Conversations. If it's too late for you to stay up, folks, do subscribe to his Mixcloud or his Facebook account so you can hear those stories of recovery, renewal, new life, hope, and love. But right now, I want to introduce you to my very special guest from Illinois, outside of Chicago, I understand, and his name is Dr. Scott Kolbaba. Hello, Dr. Scott, are you there?
Hi, Laura, I'm here, yes. And it's cold here, too.
Okay, well then we'll just all warm up. I sent you a little message earlier that just said, this book and your stories just make my heart happy. And as an internist, I thought that'd be a fun little pun. So anyway, hello, and how lovely to finally speak with you voice to voice over the airwaves. Thank you. We're delighted to have you. And friends, I'm not sure if it's okay. You know, I spent 30 years in medicine, doctor, and so for me, it's like you call a doctor doctor unless he says it's okay to call him Scott. So either way.
You can call me anything you like, Laura. Scott's fine.
Scott's fine. It's fine with me. Yeah. I'm a Scott, but not the same way. Anyway, friends, Dr. Scott Kolbaba has written a book that I've been advertising on my social media for days and days called Physicians' Untold Stories. And the part of the book that he's going to be talking about many parts of it today, but this he calls it the stories that physicians are hesitant to share with their patients or with anyone else. And you know, that's true. And after 30 years in medicine, I can tell you that's very definitely true. But I want to give you just a little rundown on Scott's credentials here. So he is a trained internist, and he is a gentleman whose education is varied. He has an economics degree from Cornell College in Mount Vernon. He has, and that's Iowa, right? IA is Iowa. Yeah.
Yep, Iowa. Mm-hmm.
Good. And then also he has his medical degree with honors from University of Illinois College of Medicine. And then his internship was done at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's in Chicago. His residency was in internal medicine at Mayo Clinic. In addition to all of these credentials, Scott has honors in his memberships in Alpha Omega Honor Medical Society and the Mayo Clinic Alumni Society. He has a lovely wife named Joan, 7 children, and at least one dog named Gracie, right?
That's correct. She's a big dog, about 150 pounds.
Right. She's beautiful too. I've seen her picture. But these are just a very few of his credentials. He's awarded for his training and his disciplines in as an intern and as a resident. And he's a man who has spent his life advocating for marginalized people in places like Romania with the Adoption Society of Romanian Orphans. So when you buy his book, and I'm sure you're going to want to after you hear about this, you can read about him, and he's just a fascinating man. And once again, I want to thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Laura. Happy to be here.
Oh, that just makes my heart happy again. So we're going to just start off talking about physicians' untold stories. And I want to ask you, first of all, and we've already agreed on most of these questions, what was impetus for you to write this book? I know you've explained that in the book, but I'd really like my listeners to hear this.
You know, Laura, sometimes you get that little feeling inside that you need to do something. And I had a few unusual experiences myself with patients and other doctors. And then what really tipped me over was an experience I had with one of my surgical friends, Dr. Moak, who's an orthopedic surgeon. And I was making rounds on the floor, and he literally came up to me, almost running, and grabbed my arm and said, "Scott, I've got to tell you about this incredible story." I said, "Go ahead." And he said, "Well, I can't do it here. Someone might hear me." And I said, "Well, who did you tell this story to already?" And he said, "No one. I'm afraid that they would think I was crazy if I told this story," which is why I put in the book just stories that doctors are hesitant to tell their patients or anyone.
Right.
So we went into an empty patient room, and he closed the door, and he said, "You know, one of your patients, Mary, arrested on the operating table a few months ago. I don't know if you were aware of that." And I had known that before. And she was given an antibiotic, and she arrested after the antibiotic was given. Eyes closed, no pulse, no respirations, no response to pain, nothing. So they called the code in the operating room, and when that happens, everyone rushes in from the operating rooms around. And one of the techs that came into the room had really bright red hair underneath his operating room cap. He started to do CPR, but he wasn't doing it adequately enough, and Dr. Mokel recognized he wasn't getting a pulse. And so he said, "Step aside, let me take over." And the fellow didn't hear him or didn't step aside, and he asked him again, didn't step aside. So in the code, things are not always as polite as it could be because it's a life and death situation. So Dr. Mokel actually pushed him aside. He stumbled away. Dr. Mokel then started to do CPR, and her heart rate came back after a little adrenaline, a few things intravenously, and she didn't wake up to consciousness, but she came back to life. And they transferred her then to the ICU where the cardiologist took over, and they determined ultimately that it was the antibiotic that caused her to arrest. And when she was ready to leave the hospital in a couple of days, Dr. Mokel was giving her final instructions, and she said, "Thank you for saving my life." And he said, "Well, it's just a team effort. He's a humble guy." And she said, "No, I saw you push that guy with red hair aside and take over my CPR, and that's when I started to come back." And Dr. Mokel, by this time, got a little weak-kneed and sat down. And she said, "I also saw you," and she mentioned multiple little details of the arrest and the code that no one could have even told her had she not been there. And he said, "Well, how did this happen?" And she said, when I arrested, my consciousness rose to the top of the room, and I was watching everything that happened. And while I was there, my grandmother came to me, who had been dead for a number of years, and told me that I would have a special place in heaven if I was a kind and considerate person the rest of my life. And then she came back as her heart started to go and so forth. And Dr. Mokel, was trying to explain this scientifically to himself, and he just couldn't come up with an explanation. And indeed, Mary, who was the patient, was, before this arrest, was a little bit of a curmudgeon, as they might say. And afterwards, she was the kindest person in the world. And Dave Mokel, Dr. Mokel, said, I can't explain how she saw everything, except that she probably did. And so, and I said, but, you haven't told anyone this story, Dave? He said, no. Again, it would make me look a little strange if I told everyone. So that's what got me. That's what tipped me over. And I thought, I wonder if other doctors have stories like this. And I was surprised that many doctors have stories. Some not as spectacular as this, but many stories about God's intervention in their life, about some unexplained dreams or occurrences that they couldn't explain, that they don't like to tell anyone, just because they would be chastised, or they might lose patience with, this is a crazy doctor who has these dreams or premonitions or visions or whatever.
Right.
So I was fortunate enough to get about 30 doctors to tell me their stories, and I wrote them down, and they all agreed to have them published in this book, which is amazing.
Yes, it is, and so many of these stories touched me, and I will relate at the end one of the ones that took me back to my years in the operating room at University of Colorado, and that's a major trauma center here, and I was an OR tech first assistant, and wow, but it just took me back, and I was telling my husband about it last night because I was shaking, saying this is what it's like to be in a MASH unit. It was the one of the ones in the Philippines, but we'll talk about that later. I want to ask you also, if you just mentioned about finding the people for this, the interviews for this book. How did you do that?
Well, I like to hang out in the doctor's lounge, and if you've been in the medical field, doctor's lounge has wonderful things that attract doctors, like coffee and donuts and sweet rolls and all the good things in life.
Right.
And so I used to hang out in the doctor's lounge in the morning, and anyone that would come through, I'd say, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about whether you have any stories for me. And I'd relate a quick story, and they would get an idea of what I wanted. And it was amazing how many. There's probably 200 doctors that I actually interviewed, and it was amazing the number of stories I got. I just used the ones that made me emotionally charged. That if it brought me to tears or it gave me goosebumps, that was the story for me. There are many more stories that I heard, but that's pretty much how I found the stories. And then what I do is I call the doctor later on that day or that evening, and we talk about the story in detail, and then we go back and forth like that about 5 or 6 times until we had the story exactly right, and then I give it to my editor, and we publish it. So that's how I found the doctors. And every doctor, lots of doctors, in every hospital or every institution has stories like this, but you don't hear about them. Even doctors don't talk to each other about this.
You had shared in the book that doctors don't often share their spiritual, their family, their even hobbies with each other, and they spend all this time together. And I thought that was very interesting that you were able to get these physicians to come and tell these stories. And I'm just going to say right now, friends, and I've had a lot of wonderful guests on my show, but you will pick this book up and you will read it once and won't put it down. And then you'll read it again. I promise you. And I did that. I have read it, and I have all these little pink tags everywhere. I have a million questions, but it's always my practice to have my guest explain in their words what they want talked about and what they want to get across to you in this little half-an-hour show. But I also just want to giggle a minute with you because my husband laughs at me when I write. I write a blog. I have written one book, and I'm on my way to writing a couple more. And I have, guess what, Scott? I have a yellow tablet and a number 2 pencil.
That's exactly what I use.
I know you do. And I
sharpened about 4 yellow pencils when I was talking to the docs on the phone because I would have to write so fast.
That's right.
And after I'd get done, I would go back and make sure that the words that were scribbled,
right.
I penciled in the printed word so that I would remember what that word was.
Good.
So my handwriting was bad in the first place, but it was really bad going through quickly. But that's how I did it. You're absolutely right. That's funny.
And I also have a voice recorder when we're on the road because we travel a lot, and I'm a medical transcriptionist, and I have all my transcription equipment. So I can type, man, I can type. But that was so funny. Thank you. I just had to share that I'm not the only person in the world that writes like that. So thank you so much.
It's old-fashioned, maybe, but it worked.
It's okay, and my handwriting isn't great either after years of transcribing. But I love to work like that. Let's talk about the main themes of this book. And boy, there are lots of them, but what would you narrow down to say, these are the main themes of this particular work for you?
You know, Laura, it's interesting when you write a book like this, and I just collected stories, and I just published the ones that moved me most significantly. And so you never know what the bottom line is for a book until it actually comes together. And what I've discovered, you probably did the same thing with your book, is that as a book takes a life of its own after you put everything together. And I think the main theme of this book is and the docs would go along with this, and that there is a God. There's something higher than us that loves us unconditionally, that participates in our lives. And that whenever we take on some interesting project that is for the good, there are things that will happen. Paths will be smooth, coincidences will happen that we can't explain. And I think that's the action of God in our lives. So one of the other subtopics or sub-themes in the book is that people in the past can still participate in our lives in strange and wonderful ways in many cases. And that helping others should be doing service and helping others should be our daily goal, and we're actually benefiting more by doing that than the people that we help. In addition, I called doctors sappy do-gooders. That was another one of the
I love that, yeah.
themes in the book.
Yeah.
And you know, the doctors that I associate with, and I think most doctors are this way, they still want to do good in the world. They want to help someone every day. They want to save lives, they want to cure cancer, they want to do the good things that they've always wanted to do in their lives, which is one of the reasons they went into medicine. And it was really gratifying to see that. You know, everyone talks about doctors making so much money and having nice cars and so forth. But I think the thing that I found was that doctors deep inside really want to do good and want to help someone every single day. That's one of the other themes, I think, in the book.
And it wasn't only just within the medical realm. What I took from it was many of these stories were based on physicians who had given up that nice car, comfy home, had gone to places like the Philippines, Africa,
Yes.
different places where we are not talking about your basic comforts and, you know, the Starbucks on the corner. We're talking about life conditions where every day to survive is a struggle for the people who live there and for those that go to help them. Yes?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are many doctors that do mission trips on a regular basis. And one of the doctors, Dr. Adolf, spent 42 years in Ethiopia taking care of the natives in Ethiopia. And, you know, that kind of work is unbelievably hard because when a person comes in, and this happened every single day, a person would come in near death. And if he didn't do an operation or work on that person, either medically or surgically, they would die. So you're under the gun to perform every single day.
That's right.
And that was one of his problems, as you know, in the story.
The exhaustion came off the page at me. The bone-breaking exhaustion.
Yeah, after 6 or 7 months of this, when he first started, he didn't know how to handle things, and he was just exhausted. He prayed one morning, and he said, God, you know, I can't go on. If you can't send me someone to help me today and take over my practice while I have a break, I can't go on, I'll have to quit.
Yeah.
And that's when someone miraculously showed up. That was a trained thoracic surgeon that let him take off a month and recover.
Yeah.
And why that surgeon showed up there is because a month before that, he spun a map around in his kitchen and decided to go on a mission and closed his eyes and put his hand down and landed on Ethiopia, where Dr. Adolf happened to be practicing, and he headed off to Ethiopia and found a hospital when he was there. And a whole bunch of interesting coincidences.
They're just brilliant, and the Dr. Mendenhall, I believe it was, that ended up taking all the no exits on the highway that he went home every day on and ended up in a hospital. We're going to talk about that here in a few minutes too. And one of my specialties in the OR also was orthopedics. So those screws and plates, if you don't have the right stuff, you're just in a world of hurt. But I want to take just a second and thank our international audience here. So we have folks from Ireland, we have Canada, Italy, we have Brazil, and we also have Malaysia here today. We have Turkey. We have many people who listen to us from the United Kingdom, and we're so grateful. We're just so grateful to have you folks with us. And of course, we cannot go by the thank you table without issuing a real voice of gratitude to our American sisters and brothers and the Colorado and Chicago people who I think are probably listening in or kind of popping up here on our screen that monitors us. And are you there?
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
okay, I just heard a beep, and I'm not really sure what it is, but Uncle Henry's taking care of it. That was Henry Archuleta, by the way, that you met earlier. He's our producer, and he's just a brilliant man. So we're not sure. Why are we beeping, Uncle Henry? He says we're okay. I don't know. You know me, I'm a little jumpy on these things. But at any rate, what I want to say too, I want to talk about a story that touched me and took me back just very briefly. Um, it was one in the Philippines where the doctor was doing a surgery on a woman who had a lot of pelvic disease with just socked down. And I don't want to get out of the realm where lay people are lost here, but basically, you know, it's kind of like a bunch of socked down mesh. You can't get to anything. And she began to ooze blood. And as she oozed that blood, it just started welling up into the pelvic cavity, and he just prayed. I can't do it. What am I supposed to do here? I'm paraphrasing, but that was it, you know. And all of a sudden, I was back in the OR 40 years ago, standing next to staff, surgeons, residents, interns, and medical students. I was responsible for teaching medical students sterile technique and, you know, slapping their hands. That was always fun. But yeah, and now they all love me, I'm sure. But anyway, what my thing was the blood, you know, in this scene was coming up, and I remember the years of being in those situations in a trauma when that blood seriously is, everybody's got their hands on lap sponges, which are big pieces of white absorbent cloth, pushing into that belly or wherever, and the feeling, the helpless feeling, literally, of a sinking ship. They're dying. Well, you're watching those monitors.
25 miles away too. They had no blood bank in this little tiny Philippine hospital that was off in the boonies.
Exactly.
So there was no blood.
Right. And at University of Colorado, you call in 3 floors down and boom, up it comes. But right. That sinking feeling of life being lost right under your hands. And it took me right back. And in this case, this story, I just was crying as I saw the miracle where the tissue separated and he could see the major offending bleeder. And went after it. The uterine artery, I believe, he went after it. He was able to clamp it, and this woman is alive enough to thank him now today.
That was a prayer that he said right in the middle of surgery. He had no idea what to do. Everything became silent.
Right.
All the texts, everything. You know how that goes when there's a disaster happening.
You're quiet,
no one
man.
says anything.
You say nothing.
No one makes eye contact.
No.
And it's, you know, and you're in charge. And,
that's right.
And he didn't know what to do, so he just closed his eyes and prayed. And it turned out when he opened his eyes, the tissue planes had fallen apart, and he was able to get to the bleeding major blood vessels, tied them off, and she lived.
And she lived to send him a thank you note.
She did.
That's wonderful. I just, but that was it wasn't my favorites. Well, I can't say my favorite. They're all my favorites. It's like having kids. They're all your favorites. But I just, some of them, especially the OR, scary things in the OR that took me back. I could hear those choppers overhead. I could do it all. But thank you for sharing that story. And I'm wondering if while we have time, we've got a little time. Uncle Henry never kicks me off the air when I have a guest like this. He knows the world. This is a worldwide stage, friends. And again, you're on KUHS Denver.com, Artist Nook. I'm Laura Paget. We're with Dr. Scott Kolbaba, who has written this book called Physicians' Untold Stories, and they are actually about miracles like what we've just talked about. So, Scott, how do folks get a copy of this, please? How can we get
It's
hold of it?
available on Amazon.com, so it's available in Kindle and also soft cover, and it's also available to some of the other sites, iBooks and so forth, through like Barnes & Noble, online only, as an iBook.
Okay, and you have a website too, right?
We have a website, physiciansuntoldstories.com, and you can link into, as a matter of fact, if you have any stories, I'd love to have them, put them on the website. But there's also a link to how to purchase the book on the website too, and some additional stories and some videos that might be interesting.
Well, lovely, and thank you, and I'll just say too, I want to know what you're up to next.
Well, this book has generated a fair amount of interest and a fair amount of emotion, and I've gotten some incredible letters from people that say, thank you for writing this book. I was distraught and unhappy and hopeless, and now I have hope again. And that was my hope, that people would read this book and realize there's some good in the world. And I hope my next book will be nursing. So maybe, Laura, I can get some of your stories, Nurses' Untold Stories, in my next book.
Well, and I'm a tech. I was a tech. I never did go to nurses training. In the 60s, it was more lucrative to be an operating room technician. People were coming back from NOM, and we had all kinds of techs. But what was interesting was that I watched in the field, and I didn't want to circulate. I wanted to be up there. I wanted to be handing instruments. I wanted to be holding retractors. I wanted to be helping with stringing sutures. Those were the days when we strung the sutures before they were, pop-offs. And things, I wanted to be in the thick of it. And, one thing, Scott, that your book has really taught me, and this is what I hope the Artist's Nook does for all of us. Guys, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get, like Scott is saying, the stories. We're trying to get people to tell their stories, to walk their lives out there, because this is how we all find we are connected. We belong to each other. And the work this man has done and his colleagues, it's just going to inspire you to say, wow, maybe I could tell a story or two. So that's my thinking, Scott, but jump in here.
That's true, Laura. And when I hear people, after I tell a story to a person or a patient or whomever, I frequently get, oh yeah, I didn't think about this, but I had a coincidence that maybe was more than a coincidence. And some people have related some fascinating stories to me that they thought they just dismissed as a coincidence, but it really wasn't. And I think after they hear some of these stories, they realize that they had the hand of someone above in their lives, and helping them in what they did.
Well, and I also want to say that it certainly brought me back into an attitude of gratitude. I was 26 years old when I practiced in the operating room. I practiced all the way into my 50s, which was quite a ways back. But, it just brought me back to saying, wow, God, I didn't realize at the time you were using me in my training and my ability to be part of this privileged team to help people, and sometimes to help them over to the other side.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's very true.
That's a huge miracle in itself, Scott. As you know, it's just a huge miracle in itself. And one other question I want to ask you, but we did talk briefly in email about possibly you coming back so we can re-explore this stuff. If you have time, maybe later this year. You're busy.
I'd be happy to.
You have 7 kids, and you have a busy family. Lots of grandkids now too, right?
9 grandkids, 7 kids. I'm not sure where they all came from, Laura, but we've got 7.
Well,
I wouldn't give up any of them.
I know you, and they wouldn't give you up. They're very blessed to have you, let me tell you. And one thing I did want to ask you, though, is what kind of reactions have you gotten from the medical community that maybe people who are not necessarily involved in this particular piece of work? What kind of things have come to you as far as feedback about that?
I was surprised. I thought people would be a little bit skeptical, and how did you make up these stories and things like that. But we've had some incredibly positive comments. As a matter of fact, lots of doctors are reading the book. They're enjoying it. They're getting a lot out of it. And one of the doctors in the book wanted to be anonymous because the event that happened to him. He was the patient, actually.
Right.
And so he wanted to be anonymous. And after we saw the reaction of people, doctors, and everyone to the stories in the book, he said, I don't want to be anonymous anymore. I want my name out there. I want
Right.
to be part of this.
That's funny.
And so that was
Sure.
very interesting. It was shocking to see how positive the response has been from everyone.
Wow, that's just wonderful, and I'm so grateful you've been with us today. I just have a couple more minutes, and I again want to thank Scott for being with us, for sharing this work. Folks, go to Amazon and have a look at this book, and I'm telling you, the money is so worth it. Physicians Untold Stories, Scott J. Kolbaba, MD, with 26 other physicians, and you know, to read it, it really does spark memories of hopefully the memories in your life. And do tell those stories because they're important. But one other thing that I think is just vital for us to discuss is, do you think the rain delay for the series this year was a big help for the Cubbies to take that title?
You know, Laura, I think the Cubs were. I watched the game. Obviously, everyone in Chicago watched the game. And before the rain delay, the Cubs were clearly losing. And after the rain delay, they just went out and won. And I think that was Harry Carey and Ron Santo and whoever else is up
Oh, there you go.
looking down, and all the prayers
Yeah.
and supplications of all the people in Chicago that have been
Sure.
watching the Cubs for hundreds of years. And I think there was something to that. I can't guarantee that, but I think there was something up above looking after the Cubs.
Well, we want to thank you again for being with us. And I want to remind my audience, I am here every first and third Friday of the month. If I'm not vacationing, although I am going to start vacation time now, but even so, we'll have a lot of shows for you. And next time, which is the 17th of February, we're going to be inviting in someone who is a regular guest for me. His name is Mr. Stephen Ray Watts. And Stephen is a very committed Christian man whose music, Dotsero's music is known all over, certainly Colorado and the world, and he is going to come in and tell us about his new adventure to write lyrics to a new album. And I want us to really discuss that and, you know, the heart of an artist. So if you want to catch up with me, you can always catch up with me on my website, which is lauralpadgett.com. That's PADGETT.com. And you can see who my guests are. You can also contact me with questions for my guests. And if I get questions for Dr. Scott or anyone else, I send them on to my guests. So be with us on the 17th of February, 2 p.m. Mountain Time, right here on the Artist Nook. Check out my website so you can see where my publications are available, including the Chicken Soup books I've been featured in this past year. But I want to leave you with my wonderful friend Stephen Ray, and a song that I've danced to and I've come to absolutely love because it's called His Sanctuary. And you see, Dr. Scott, you helped me see that the whole world is his sanctuary. Everything's his sanctuary.
Thanks,
And
Laura.
it has been wonderful, and thank you again. And folks, here's one other thought I want to leave you with. Albert Einstein said, there are only two ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. Thanks, Dr. Scott. You've helped us see the miracles. Y'all have a great, you betcha. Y'all have a great weekend. Stay warm. This is Colorado, and man, there's no place like this. Maybe Chicago's good too, I'm sure. But I just want to tell you, we love you here at KUHS. God loves you. Be grateful for the miracles in your life and understand you're one of them in his sanctuary. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Are you still there? Okay, hold on 1 second.
Thank you so much. Scott, it's fabulous. I didn't know.